Hello and Happy New Year! Today we are back to talk about French. Back to the basis with the main French army and tips and tactics for them. Come and see! Welcome back to the channel. Today we are going to talk about French and their main rules and how to build a list after a few years of experience playing with them. And again, as for the Austrian, this is not a video intended for veterans who just know everything that I'm going to tell you, but for people who is starting to play with VALOR and FORTITUDE, or in general that are a newbie in Napoleonic. So let me start with the main rules for the French, which is that sheet that you can find on Perry page is Helan. Helan here, you can spot here, is the main rule for the French, which allow them to reroll the one to hit in melee when they are the main attacker, they assaulting, and they are both in line and in column. This rule has changed to represent the fact that French often fight in line and not only in column. And if you know some other Napoleonic game, most of them exalt the fact that the French are always in attack column, and this is not always true. Maybe it's true in the later period when the French are no more an experienced army, such as the Grand Armée of Austerlitz or the first year of the 1800. When they are most conscript, because the column is easier to move, easier to assault, and make soldiers more confident. And the previous rule, Elan, was the main rule for the French, just if they are in column, but it comes at the sacrifice of firepower. And let me say, as the veteran know, is not always the case. This, in fact, is the main formation taken by the French, at least in the order of Napoleon. Not always used or ordered by their marshal or their officers. It is the mixed order, with one unit in line to successfully exploit their firepower, and two units in column ready to exploit any advantage in weaker point in the enemy, or support the flank, or in general to maneuver. Some generals of Napoleon do not use this mixed order because he prefer to have a rapid response army and use column of assault often, but as I said, not always the case. So this is the main rule, and I suggest you to try to exploit it at best. I suggest, if you want to be historical, but even if you want to get from your army the best as possible, to use mixed order every time you can, because the support of the line, both in attack and in defense, are crucial, and with a line that allow you to charge in line too, do not penalize you as did before. So, coming to the list, the French have the most possibility to build a list. We go from the old guard, the best of the best army. In reality, is quite the same as the British Guard or others, very elite unit, then middle, young guard, Marines of the Guard, then Grenadier line, light infantry, and then the Marie-Louis, which essentially are the conscript. They are not a militia, but they have not a line and just skirmisher and square, and then the National Guard, which is the militia for the French. This allow you to build whatever you want. And as I said, for the Austrian, you can essentially do whatever you want with this list. You can even assemble a unit, an old guard army, but if you want to be historical, you have to follow some tips, and the veteran know this, but maybe, as I said, not all the player know exactly how to build an French list. So going on, French have many possibility, and during the Napoleonic era, the construction of the division and the brigade change much from campaign, from officer, from necessity, and the quality of the troop also really depend on where and when you play. Playing in Spain in the first year or in the later year of the campaign essentially change the status of your army if you want to be historical, okay? Because the quality of the troop downgrade. So for a pickup game, if you want to have a credible list of French without not be too penalized, or don't want to take any account but just put together some miniatures and play with your friend, should follow these tips. Have a brigade made at least of 4 units, 3 main battalion and a detachment of voltigeurs in front of them, or 4 battalion, have 1, for example, here as reserves for the main line, because you will take casualty, especially if you have to attack, and when you have to attack you need to replace your casualty or depleted battalion with a fresh one to inflict the coup de grace to the enemy line. This, at least in theory. You can do the thing when you made this. You can use a battalion made all of line infantry or mix with a light battalion. I identify my light battalion with no drummer but a horn blower musician. Historically, the division, the French division, have a brigade made by Leger and a brigade made of line. So my suggestion is to use a brigade entirely made by 3-4 battalion of Leger and 3-4 battalion, depending on how many points do you play of line. And I find during here that it works better. I know that if you play this way and you put your light battalion, the Leger, in front, you can have a double effect. They shoot better, they have 4 dice shooting, and they can go in open order to protect your main advance from the enemy fire, because the enemy have to shoot at the closest one, and they, in open order, halves the casualties. So it could be a good idea, but if you want to be historical, let me say to go with 1 brigade made all of line, and if you want a screen, use your voltigeur here. 1 of this detachment in front of your main line of advance is more than enough to protect the advance, and advance quickly towards the objectives or towards the enemy with all your brigade in column, just as for to use their speed, but as soon as possible when you are going to engage, take the mixed order, because it works. Usually it works for me, Maybe you have different experience, but I tell you, try this. Try and find the best solution for you. For me, usually this works better than use all column, because if you have enough fire support from other sources, maybe you can inflict enough casualty to break the enemy with your column of assault. But if you have to rely on your firepower, a column of assault just shoot one die, and this could not be enough to bring the enemy on the verge of collapsing. And if you spend too much time in column awaiting the right moment to charge in, probably you waste your momentum, and enemy cavalry or counter-strike unit can ruin your plan. That is my suggestion for the main asset of your army. How many brigade? It depends on how many points you play, but never go, if you can, under the 4 battalion, 4 units for a brigade. Units is better because a brigade could be 3 line, 1 of this, and an artillery. Anyway, my suggestion is, if you have enough point of model, to go with 4 battalions. If you play less point, 3 battalion and voltigeur. 3 battalion, voltigeur and artillery. Never go under 3 battalion, because it's hard to break the enemy line with few units. And French, more often than not, are on the attack. If you are not attacking with the French, there's something wrong in your plan, probably. Maybe in some scenario you are the defender, but as I said in previous video, even if you are the defender, it's a good idea to take the initiative and push back the enemy from attacking you. Stop them in the middle, in the no man's land, and let some unit back to defend the objective, but push them, weak them, in order to prevent them to crush you. Because if you are waiting, you are not the best defensive army. The British are. But this is a topic of another video. If you use this asset, don't forget to have a brigade made entirely of light battalion, the Leger. Let me say, for a moment, if these are all Leger, they are a very flexible unit. They can go open order and reduce their casualty, treat a flank, move quickly across terrain. They have a very good firepower, because every unit shoot 4 dice in line or in open order, and if they are in column, they still shoot 2 dice, because they have their firepower and they are good shooters. I try to have a brigade of Leger every time I play, and they never disappoint me. They are weaker than line in melee, and this follow the main rules for all the light battalion in this game. But French Leger are not so different from the line. So if you have enough point, pay elite melee for your Leger too. They cost a little bit more and they are just expensive. Light infantry is 27 point, but if you pay 3 more point and bring them to 30 point, they are aligned with the bonuses of open order and firepower. This is my suggestion if you want to do this. Now, another suggestion, I don't put here the model, with the French is very historical and, let me say, very useful to have plenty of this detachment. I know that they are weak, but French usually deploy lots of skirmisher in front of their army. They are the first to use the tactics. They were later on copied by other army. British have a light company, but I told but I will tell you about them later on. One thing that I'm testing right now and I'm using right now is to use a brigade made entirely by Voltigeur in detachment. And this essentially is because it's historical and is very useful. A veil of troop in front of your army to protect almost all the front lets you to maneuver very well. And again, you are the attacker, they go forward, they harass the enemy, they occupy terrain, they are quick but a small target because they occupy a short part of the front. Honestly, I taste the summer rule to have this kind of brigade as a forward attachment, but recently, watching across this rule, I find that it's not necessary to have a kind of infiltration rule. Just make a division of them, put in front of your army, and be sure that their officer is always in range of your main commander, so they are always the first to be activated. This, at least at the beginning, because you need to move the rest of your army, and if they remain stuck on the spot, this block your army. So I know that is a kind of risk because your free activation is go with a weak unit, weak brigade. They are prone to melee, to cavalry, to many danger for them. So you have to be careful in using them. But I suggest you to try this because it save many casualty to your main army, especially if you have to cross a good amount of terrain before reaching the enemy line. Obviously, you have to pay many points for them, so this is good if you play large battle with many models. If you play a couple of brigade, this is not worth, okay? Then, counter-strike unit or elite that will break the enemy at the right moment. These two, grenadier, regular grenadier, battalion composed by the grenadier and carabiniers for the regiment from the battalion that put together in ad hoc formation to assault. If you play with few points, this is a good solution because grenadier have a good stats. Grenadier have a firepower of 3, 5 attack and 4 of tenacity. And if you play this unit is a good compromise between a regular infantry and a very elite guard. And if you pay the points to make them elite, both tenacity and melee, or just a tenacity, you will have a decent punching unit to break the enemy line, or counter-strike the enemy, or simply finish off the job when the infantry have done their main effort. Guard, I have only the old guard. I have no models for the young and the middle guard, but this is the very best troop at your disposal. In this case, they are chasseurs of the old guard, 1st Regiment. But this is the cream of the cream. The downgrade is that they fought few times because usually they are the personal guard of Napoleon, so they will take the field when Napoleon is on the battlefield. And if you want to be historical, you have to have Napoleon to fill the old guard. Different thing if you have a middle guard or a young guard, which sometimes are deployed and sent to fight even if the emperor is far away from the battlefield. Anyway, this is one of the best and iconic unit in the French army, and there's few things to say about them. They are strong enough to cut across almost every enemy unit. their counterpart is the British Guard, which are as good as them, even if not historical, because British Guard are good, are excellent soldier, but not at the level of the whole grognard of the French Imperial Guard. And other important support for the French is artillery. Napoleon used them in a large number, so if you want to be historical, play artillery in large number. They are not game breaking, and with this rule we know, but artillery are not breaking in any Napoleon rule, in my opinion. As the Austrian, French have battery rules, and 3 heavy gun with artillery, and maybe an officer, a brigade of artillery with an officer with artillerist trait, make them, let me say, strong. Not so strong because they need line of sight, and you have to pay a lot to have a battery as a brigade and with an officer with the artillerist trait, but they represent quite well how the French use artillery to bombard the enemy spot, point where they want to attack, long enough to put some casualty. And the best way to represent this is a battery of artillery with artillerists, so it can choose its target and not force it to shoot at the closest one. And with the reroll of the 1 and the long distance of the heavy artillery, the 54 inches and 2 dice per cannon, 2 dice plus the support, they roll enough dice to put casualty in your target. If you do not play with trait for your officer, this probably doesn't worth the points that this battery will cost you. So keep in mind this when you put together. And now moving into the other aspect of the French. The cavalry are the other hard-hitting units for the French, as for any other army. And the French have many options to choose. You have heavy cavalry. Here I made a unit of grenadier on cheval, but they do not exist on the datasheet. So I use them because I like the idea and the model. But when I play, if I deploy them, I use them as cuirassier or carabinier, probably carabinier. Then Dragoon, I come back to them in a sec. Cuirassiers are your heavy cavalry. And then light cavalry, you have hussars. There are many choices from the hussars, but the rules are the same for all of them. And chasseur and cheval, and then lancers that I have not deployed here, but I have Polish lancers or regular lancers. Light cavalry were used as explorator to harass flank, to threat isolated patrol, or to follow a broken enemy. Light cavalry in this game, and with the French as attacker, is almost always the case. They can be used, in my opinion, first of all in large number. A single unit do nothing, but nothing is not exactly. They act poorly on the table. They are weak, just 3 tenacity, so they're prone to fire just 1 casualty, make your cavalry less efficient on the battlefield. So large number to absorb the casualty. And remember that you can go in open order to reduce the casualty. So if you plan to use them on a flank, for example, one of your light cavalry should be in front and in open order to protect the rest of your cavalry. so acting as explorer in this way. And they can threat a flank or isolated position or an objective, but they cannot withstand too many firepower or last too long or face heavy cavalry by themselves. So you have to be careful using your light cavalry, and I suggest you to do not use them as reserves, because they have not the power to crack a line if the enemy have reserves behind them. Even with the cavalry retreat, they will take enough casualty to become wordless, useless in a turn of two. And when you are exhausted, when you are shaken, yes, you can retreat and try to rally, but it costs you many turns to do this, and maybe you have not the time to put the light cavalry again on the field. So my suggestion for light cavalry is to make a brigade with their officer and at least 3-4 is better unit. One is your chaff unit, a sacrifice unit, to stay in front in open order to absorb casualty and let the other two work. But it really depends on the mission and on the table and on the enemy deployments. There are so many things to take in account to have a single rule to them. Sometimes they can attack head on and it work, but my experience say different. Generally, they work better as a support. Then moving to heavy cavalry, make 1 or 2 brigade. It depends on the point, depend on the scenario, depend on where you play. If you play in the peninsula, Dragoon are essentially your only heavy cavalry. So if you want to go historical, you have to play only Dragoons if you play in the peninsula. In Europe, you can have other cavalry. How to use heavy cavalry? First, I say they are different from carabineers or cuirassiers. These two heavy cavalry are there to exploit the success of the infantry, break the enemy at the right point, or mostly, as I have to admit, counter the enemy cavalry, counter-strike the enemy cavalry. So they are the perfect reserves to put into the fray in the last moment. And don't be too eager to use your heavy cavalry too early in the game, because they are frail, and if they take too many casualty, have the same problem of the light cavalry. They have to recover, to fall back, to rally. Rally is not automatic, because even with a 5+, if you have no enemy within 12 inches, is not easy task to remove many casualty from them. So my suggestion for heavy cavalry in larger battle, if you have, is to have 2 brigade, one made of Dragoon to use as, is better to say, but to use as cannon fodder, to use early as a hammer. Probably they will be destroyed or at least made useless for the casualty, but use them as a hammer and or counter the enemy cavalry and save your best heavy cavalry for later on intervention in the game, to exploit a weak point, to crush a flank, or even headlong into the center of your enemy and make the most havoc as you can. Returning to the Dragoon, they are cheap heavy cavalry. They cost as light cavalry, have 5 attack rather than 6, but tenacity of 3. So they are very, very frail. They must be used carefully, as I said, or sacrifice them in order to gain a tactical advantage. If they use only Dragoon, for example, because you are in Peninsula, I strongly suggest to use some detachment of Dragoon. Perry made them in the boxes, so you can have infantry detachment and horse artillery attached to your main heavy cavalry. Why I say this? Because you make a larger brigade, so it's harder to crush your brigade entirely, to disperse them. Even if you lost all your cavalry, you still have your infantry that certainly are back, and maybe even they do not need to move at all. Or when you move your heavy cavalry, move them with their partnered unit and occupy a terrain or something like this, a defensive position. Save your brigade with your infantry, or offer fire support before the charge of their counterpart. Another thing, rifle, carbine. Dragoon have carbine, their model have carbine. The model on foot have carbine, but there is no rule for carbine for them. Light cavalry has this unit, is rule. They have not. Jeff Johnson suggests to use home rule if you want, and any extra rules that you pay for your units cost 1 point. I always pay 1 point for carbine for the Dragoon. More to be historical than a real use, but if you have 1 point to spare per unit, pay 1 point and use carbine if your opponent is okay with this modification. Last thing to do with the Dragoon is this formation here. These are completely unofficial, okay? There is no such unit in the army sheet. I use them both for the French and for the British, because it's not common, but sometimes happened, especially in the peninsula, that Dragoon work on foot. The main idea of the Dragoon born as a rifleman mounted, and so the lack of this rule disappointed me a little bit. So I decided to have 1 unit of this for the British and 1 unit of this for the French. I used the rule that you can find in, not sure, in the American Civil War, but quite sure that is in the 30 Years War data sheet on the site, on the Paris site, or if you're on the page, on the Facebook page for the Renaissance Dragoon. Essentially, they are a small unit of cavalry which cannot attack. They cannot enter the melee, but they dismount and have a unit of light infantry, detachment of infantry essentially, that can shoot twice. They have a firepower of 2, and they can mount and fall back again to be a cavalry. Their use could be controversial because they essentially are not a proper cavalry. They cannot charge in any case. So you can use this for two main purposes. The first one is to fast deploy a shooting unit somewhere on the battlefield. Try to flank, attack a small target, isolated unit, put some casualty earlier in the enemy, keep the enemy at bay, because if you have the first turn, for example, and you move this unit forward, this could deny the double move to part of the enemy army, and this probably is one of the best way to use them, and even light cavalry, but it's a too much expensive option just to deny the double move. And the other one is to be the closest target. They are a sacrificial unit that could die quite easily, but provide a target for the enemy artillery fire that save your main cavalry. I know that in the rule there is cavalry detachment, but with a single tenacity. One of tenacity, they are really too frail to do anything good. One shot and they are shaken. Or they cannot enter in melee with anything. Even a detachment of infantry is better than them in melee. So for 13 points, I prefer to use this one, which cost me 18, if I remember what I paid them. 18, 20, can't remember. It's less expensive than a cavalry, but more expensive than a single detachment. And that's it for the units and for the tips. Last thing to do, no, not the last thing, I have another thing. Marshals. Marshals lead the corps, but I know that every one of you, exactly like me, want a French marshal to lead its army. So the best that I can say, if you really want to go historical, is to assume that the marshal is in the right place to direct the operation of your army, which in 28 mil is a division at best, or part of a division. So the marshal is there to lead your. You are lucky enough to have a marshal that lead your army at the moment, because we want Davout or Lannes or Soult or Massena, even Napoleon, if you want to be honest, that lead your army. Okay. As I said, the last thing to do, how many units really depend on the point limit that you want play, and the model that you have, and the scenario. But in general, let me say that you need to have a minimum of 2 infantry brigade, 3 should be better, 1 counter-strike infantry unit, could be grenadier, could be guard, could even be line with melee and tenacity elite option, but something that can counter-strike or all the objective when the first line crumble. It's not forced to you to deploy the old guard, but grenadier or young guard should be a good idea. And the cavalry. How many cavalry? Well, again, it depends on the point limit, but at least 2 brigade, 1 made of light cavalry and 1 made of heavy cavalry. It could be Dragoon or whatever you want, but have 2 of this. How big the cavalry is? Honestly, I cannot field too much heavy cavalry. Usually I deploy 2 units of heavy cavalry with some support, or artillery or infantry detachment, as I said, knowing that the brigade is frail, so you have to be very careful in using them. And 1 unit of light cavalry, made at least of 3, if not 4 units. Now that I'm speaking about the number of cavalry, I forgot to mention that you can have a mixed brigade, so use 1 cavalry or 2 cavalry in your infantry brigade. This could be your counter-strike unit on few points, or if you want to go historical, or as I do when I use a detachment. I say detachment, but it's not a detachment. When I use a brigade made of allies, Polish for the French. When I made a small Polish brigade, I have the Lancers attached to them, or King German Legion or Portuguese, and I use sometimes a unit of Hussars or Dragoons attached to them. I think that I cover every aspect of the French And this is my essentially experience, in a few years of the game. So I hope that this video will help you. I know that it ended quite longer, but French are French and there are so many things to do and to tell about them. And that's it. Thank you for watching, happy wargaming, and see you soon as possible with the English, the British